RuBru means face-to-face in the Urdu language. If you are a Muslim, the RuBru-ftf series can help you find your bearings on where Muslims stand today in relation to their recent past. All viewers may find many of the misconceptions floating around, corrected by the information the RuBru-ftf series supplies. DMSR stands for Do Muslims Still Regress? The basic question of the DMSR series inevitably deals with the compatibility of the Muslim attitude with the Age of Enlightenment. The pursuit of knowledge is a religious obligation for Muslims, which they have fulfilled thoroughly. One huge contribution of Muslims to science is to gift it the scientific method. Science in Greek hands was never exposed to experimental methods for the verification of a hypothesis. The reason can be seen in the Greek attitude towards the world of matter. In the words of Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, at the philosophical level, Socrates concentrated his attention on the human world alone. To him, the proper study of man was man, and not the world of plants, insects, and stars. As a true disciple of Socrates, Plato despised sense perception, which, in his view, yielded mere opinion and no real knowledge. The Greeks came to believe that the only acceptable way of obtaining knowledge was the use of deduction. However, this way of doing science had serious limitations when it was applied to other areas of knowledge, but from the standpoint of the Greeks, it was hard to notice. In antiquity, the starting point to discover principles was always an idea in the mind of the philosopher. Aristotle, for example, proposed theories in physics based on observation but not tested through controlled experimentation. The Greek method of inquiry focused on logical reasoning and deduction rather than experimentation. This was the world of scientific knowledge that Ibn Al-Haytham, d. 1040, stepped in. His contribution steered science into a new direction. In the words of the author of Ibn Al-Haytham, the Muslim scientist who birthed the scientific method, Ross Pomeroy, the years of solitary work culminated in his Book of Optics, which expounded just as much upon his methods as it did his actual ideas. Anyone who read the book would have instructions on how to repeat every single one of Ibn al-Haytham's experiments. His message is, "Don't take my word for it. See it for yourself." The scientific method, which brought science to where it is today, starts with observation, creates a hypothesis, performs experiments, carries out analyses, and draws conclusions. Thoroughly carried out and widely documented research shows that all scientific work in physics completely lacked this method before Ibn al-Haytham. An attempt to Europeanize the scientific method through scientists who appeared more than 200 years after Ibn al-Haytham is there, which has been strongly disputed by European scholars. The greatest gift of Muslims to science is the scientific method for verifying the truth. What this did to science is about the same that the wheel did to the progress of humanity. It appears to be simple now, like every great discovery that has been made since then. Roger Bacon, d. 1294, would be the most likely answer to today's question as to who pioneered the scientific method. According to Ross Pomeroy, the origins of the scientific method harken back to the Islamic world, not the Western one. Around 250 years before Roger Bacon expounded on the need for experimental confirmation of his findings, an Arab scientist named Ibn al-Haytham was saying the exact same thing. Ibn al-Haytham died in 1040. On the claim that Roger Bacon pioneered the experimental method, Robert Briffault recorded a significant observation in his groundbreaking book, The Making of Humanity. Neither Roger Bacon nor his later namesake has any title to be credited with having introduced the experimental method. Roger Bacon was no more than one of the apostles of Muslim science and method to Christian Europe, and never wearied of declaring that a knowledge of Arabic and Arabian science was for his contemporaries the only way to true knowledge. Discussion as to who was the originator of the experimental method, like fostering of every Arab discovery or invention on the first European who happens to mention it, the experimental method of the Arabs was by Bacon's time widespread and eagerly cultivated throughout Europe. On the claim that the modern scientific method was developed by European scientists, Professor Jim Khalili is quite clear. There is no doubt in my mind, however, that Ibn al-Haytham arrived there first. Ibn al-Haytham's own work preserves the details of his scientific method, leaving no reason for present-day scholars to silently witness any attempt to credit Roger Bacon or others for this achievement. The recorded scientific method proposed by Ibn al-Haytham, in the words of Martin Shuttleworth, the author of Who Invented Scientific Method, involved the following stages. 1. Observation of the natural world. 2. Stating a definite problem. 3. Formulating a robust hypothesis. 4. Test the hypothesis through experimentation. 5. Assess and analyze the results. 6. Interpret the data and draw conclusions. And 7. Publish the findings. The current scientific method relies on the same stages. This is why the scientific community today is in agreement that, amongst the array of great scholars, Al-Haytham is regarded as the architect of the scientific method. Ibn al-Haytham, according to Ross Pomeroy, was also a progenitor of critical thinking and skepticism, quite similar to the approach of many modern scholars. According to him, the duty of the man who investigates the writings of scientists, if learning the truth is his goal, is to make himself an enemy of all that he reads, and attack it from every side, he wrote. He should also suspect himself as he performs his critical examination of it, so that he may avoid falling into either prejudice or leniency. Muslim scientists left a rich tradition based on experimentation. In George Sarton's words, they were always eager to put a theory to tests, and they were never tired of experimentation. Though motivated and permeated by the spirit of their religion, they would not allow dogma, as interpreted by the orthodox, to stand in the way of their scientific research. Tbocchi et al., in Ibn al-Haytham, father of modern optics, say, Ibn al-Haytham developed rigorous experimental methods of controlled scientific testing in order to verify theoretical hypotheses and substantiate inductive conjectures. Ibn al-Haytham's scientific method was very similar to the modern scientific method and consisted of a repeating cycle of observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and the need for independent verification. Ibn al-Haytham has been called the pioneer of the modern scientific method and the founder of experimental physics, and for these reasons he has been described as the first scientist. According to Butzliff and Aidan in Ibn al-Haytham and Scientific Method, Greek scientific tradition largely relied on observation and hypothesis. Ibn al-Haytham conducted experiments to prove or disprove a hypothesis by observation, hypothesis, experiment, and conclusion. Again, except for the fringe, the mainstream scholarship today sees the scientific method as Muslims' gift to science. If you like this video, please share it and hit the subscribe button so that the next videos can reach you easily.